we can.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Are you ready, Heather?
Yeah, we just went live.
Awesome. All right, guys, it is an honor and a pleasure to be with you today for our latest webinar. We are super lucky to have Dan Buettner with us today, a guy that I was lucky enough to meet with on Necker Island. And Dan is a world-renowned expert in longevity. He has spent his career studying who lives longest in different parts of the world and why and how, what activities lead to that lengthening of life. And then most excitingly, how he can bring those concepts back to America and allow Americans to have greater longevity, not through self-discipline or intense lifestyle changes, but more by reshaping our community and our environment in such a way that our lives can be extended by the habits that we naturally follow. So I really love Dan's presentation on Necker Island with Richard Branson, and it's been just an eye-opener for me to get to know him and read his book. So without any further ado, Dan, thanks, and welcome to our GoBundance webinar.
It's a delight to be here, and just for the record, I'd love to be a part of your team here, the 5 pillars of GoBundance. They're very blue zones. So about a decade ago, I got an assignment from National Geographic to, in a sense, reverse engineer longevity. And the idea was played off the widely accepted assumption that only about 20% of how long the average person lives is dictated by genes. The other 80% is dictated by lifestyle and environment. It comes from the Danish twin study. So our team reasoned that if we could find areas where people live measurably longer, populations, not just individuals, and use some established methodologies to determine exactly what they're doing, we could emerge with, if not secrets for longevity, at least lessons that we can learn from people who've actually achieved what I think most of us hope to get out of life. So we found 5 places. The longest lived women on the planet, Okinawa, Japan, about 30 times more female centenarians in that population than you'd expect to see with a like number of people here in the United States. Longest lived men, a place called Sardinia, the Nuoro province of Sardinia. It's a cluster of 14 villages, about 42,000 people. You expect to see about 11 times more centenarians in that population than we have here in the United States. Ikaria, Greece, live 8 years longer than we do, but largely without dementia, which is a big issue here in America. About 50% of people listening to this right now, if they hit age 85, they can expect to be suffering from some symptoms of dementia. In America, we found the longest of people among the Seventh-day Adventists, conservative Methodists who distinguish themselves from other Christians in that they evangelize with health. They run some of the biggest hospitals in America, but they also celebrate their Sabbath on Saturday instead of on Sunday, which makes them a little bit culturally differentiated from their surrounding communities. And then the last blue zone in a place called Nicoya, Costa Rica, we found a population, and this is really interesting. They spend 1/15 the amount we do on health care, yet a 50-year-old, guys our age, have about a 2.5 times better chance of reaching a healthy age, 90, than we would see in the United States. And this is at the population level. So they're not only living a longer, healthy life expectancy, but spending a fraction of what we spend. So that sends a strong message that you do not have to be rich in this country to have health. And by the way, let me establish a few ground rules. To reach age 100 in America right now, you not only have to have had a good lifestyle generally, but you also have to have won the genetic lottery. The average maximum life expectancy of people listening right now, the average American, is about 92. That's what you can expect out of a population. We in America, on average, life expectancy is about 80, so we're leaving a dozen years on the table. And the idea of Blue Zone was to find out what people who are getting those years are doing and how to apply them to our lives. So maybe I'll let you ask a question from there.
Yeah, sure. So that's amazing. So I think a lot of our guys have gone to your website and taken your life expectancy
Vitality
questionnaire.
Yes.
Yeah, the Vitality Compass. I've seen all kinds of chatter on our elite site on people saying they had 4 years they could gain or 8 years they could gain, which is pretty cool. Why is it then that they have that? So you're saying because the average age is 78, right? But that's counting everybody that gets killed young and gets killed in car wrecks and stuff like that, right? So you're saying we can make it to 83 if we're listening to this call, or is that the new average life
90.
expectancy?
Well, the average American, if they did not do anything to foreshorten their lives, okay, i.e., do
Alcoholism.
something, yeah, alcohol, drugs, live a lifestyle that yields heart attacks. Well over 50% of heart attacks are avoidable. 40% of cancers are avoidable. 90% of diabetes are avoidable. So if you do all the right things that don't foreshorten your life, you should be able to hit 92 in this country. If you're an average person, that's a benchmark, right? So
I got you.
we can't
So
control.
let's hit some of those things. One of the ones is exercise, and I noticed in your book that it seemed like the longest lived peoples do moderate exercise for long periods of time a day. They're not necessarily Olympic athletes. They're not playing ultimate frisbee. They're not doing CrossFit. They're basically in the garden like the sheep herders that were walking, the shepherds walking up and down the mountains all day. So talk about exercise and how it relates to longevity, and then tell us your own personal exercise routine, Dan.
Yeah, let me tell you the story of the Sardinian shepherds, the longest lived men. So I work with the University of Sassari there, a guy named Gianni Pes, and he's done surveys of basically every male centenarian on the island for the last 10 years. And there's essentially two professions on Sardinia. One, you're either a farmer. Most of the people live on the coast. It's emerald green. It was the breadbasket of the Roman Empire. People are farmers. And then inland, where it's mountain, the traditional occupation has been that of a shepherd. Obviously, this has evolved, but over the past century, the centenarians, they usually had one of those two occupations. Among the farmers, you do not see any extraordinary longevity. They have the same life expectancy as their Italian counterparts. And you look at their lives, and they tend to work really hard in the growing season, kind of CrossFit type intensity to get the harvest in, and then they're sedentary. Right. Meanwhile, the shepherds, they're actually called the lazy boys of Sardinia. They sort of wake up when the sun's warm. They'll spend a couple hours with their animals, milking them or caring for them. They'll walk for a couple hours. By noon, they're taking a lunch. They take a nap, a couple more hours pasturing their animals, and by 5 o'clock, they're back in the village having wine with their friends. Those are the guys that are making it to 100 at much higher rates than the shepherds. When you work out really hard and you feel that fatigue the next morning, that achiness in the muscles, that sort of cloudy-headedness, that is actually an inflammatory response. Right. It is very similar to the inflammatory response you get from being stressed out or suffering from an infection. Your arteries and your brain don't distinguish the source of the inflammatory response. They just suffer the effects. So the reason I argue against a CrossFit is you do not want to be triggering that inflammatory response over and over and over again. It's a good idea, if you take lessons from the world's longest lived, they'll exert themselves 3 or 4 times a week for a few minutes. But most of what they're doing is every 20 minutes or so, they're pushed into gentle physical activity. They're burning calories all day long. They're keeping their metabolisms higher, probably getting more aggregate exercise than we would sitting in our office for 8 hours and thinking we're going to make it up at the gym for an hour at the end of the day. That's not how we evolved.
And you said the steeper mountain shepherds did even better than the flatter land shepherds. Is that am I remembering that correctly?
They're around the coast. They're farmers because they can grow fields. But up in the highlands where it's rocky and there's no flat terrain, it can't really support farming, but it will support pasturing sheep. So the longevity is exclusively up in the highlands. It's the Nuoro and Oleostra. If you look at a map, you'll see it's fairly vertical terrain.
You said Oleostra, is that the area?
There are two regions, Oleostra and Nuoro, N-U-O-R-O. And incidentally,
I thought that was a new kind of chip flavoring, oleostra or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. The other fat.
Yes. So these guys just get up, they move their bodies continually throughout the course of the day. So it really is the tortoise and the hare. The tortoise, the guy that's doing a little bit.
Tortoise wins when it comes to longevity too, especially when you get older and you look at marathon runners. Marathon runners, they have a shelf life of about 15 years. Some will start at 25 and they'll make it to 40, but all of a sudden your joints take a pounding. For 99.9% of human history, life expectancy of our species was 25.
Wow.
So the design of the human machine is to 25. Now, if you beat that early, you're going to develop a cumulative damage that's going to come back and haunt you in your 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. There are a few outliers, and you hear about them once in a while, who've run for 40 years, marathons for 40 years. But as a rule, you get about 90% of the benefit of a workout by just walking an hour and 15, an hour and 20 minutes a day than you will training for a marathon.
And what are ways that we can incorporate that in our lifestyle? One of the things my insurance company gave me was a new Fitbit. And the Fitbit gives me $1 off my insurance every day if I walk for 5 minutes of every hour. So I walk 5 minutes, then it stops the counter. And if I do that 6 times in a day, I get $1 off my annual deductible. Is it that simple that we should just try to keep our body moving on a 20 minutes out of every hour, 5 minutes out of every hour?
It's absolutely the right idea, but the Fitbit, I would argue, is the wrong execution. These technology gadgets, if you look at the history of technology gadgets, we get really excited about them for a while. It was the Nike thing before that. It was the pedometer before that. It was the accelerometer. And you kind of get excited about them for 6 months or a year, and then they break or new technology comes. In Blue Zones, I like to focus on, I like the idea of moving 5 minutes every hour, or maybe even a little bit more. But I'd be a much bigger fan of setting up your surroundings so you're nudged into moving every 5 minutes every hour. And some things we know work, at home, deconveniencing your home. I mean, we've engineered out most of the physical activity involved with housework and kitchen work and yard work. We can engineer that out by, in some cases, going back to hand tools and getting rid of garage door openers and all these things that I kind of blue zone my house. I live on 3 stories, and I put my TV room on the 3rd story. So now, if I'm up there, and I don't watch a lot of TV, but when I do, and I get hungry, I got to go down 37 stairs, and then grab whatever I want to grab and go up 37 stairs. Well, most of the time I don't want to go through that pain in the butt, so I don't do it in the first place. But if I do, it occasions that 3 or 4 minutes of physical activity. I know we've heard a million times stand-up desks, but they actually work. You burn about 300 calories a day if you have a stand-up desk. Some of the other things we do in Blue Zone workplaces, we make sure there's a policy where if you drive your car, you're on your own. If you take a bus, we reimburse, 100% reimburse, self-reported. And if you bike to work or walk to work, we actually pay employees $5 a day, self-reported. It turns out that people who commute on public transportation, on average, get about 19 minutes of physical activity a day, which is way more than the average American, by the way. And they have 11% lower risk of developing cardiovascular disease. And that's a free nudge. That it doesn't rely on a technology or gadgetry, etc. So
that's amazing. So I love this concept of deconveniencing your house. One of the things we talk about at GoBundance is that your environment must support your goals. And we put that into many terms, like if you hang out with a bunch of people that are unmotivated, over time you won't be as motivated. Right? So one of the things I do at my personal house is we don't have ice cream or chips or anything in the house. We have fruit and nuts on the countertop and healthy snacks. And so when I've got the munchies at 4 or 5 o'clock, the only thing I can find is generally fairly healthy food. And I find if there's anything not healthy in the house, I immediately start eating that. So we control our environment by just not buying the good stuff. So the other thing we try to do...
Go ahead.
Yeah, go.
No, so there's in Blue Zone Solution, there's 4 things you should never have in your house. And this is not to say you shouldn't eat them, by the way, because if you want to celebrate once in a while, you should do it. But to your point, packaged sweets, processed meats, soda pops, and chips. Chips are the food most highly associated with obesity. The 4 foods you should always have in your house are your favorite fruit in a fruit bowl that's in the middle of your kitchen,
Yep.
Nuts. People who eat a handful of nuts live 2 to 3 years longer than people who don't eat nuts. A 100% whole wheat bread. The Blue Zone's diet, that's about 65% of their dietary intake comes from carbohydrates, but complex carbohydrates. And then sweet potatoes, which, I'm not a big fan of superfoods, but I will tell you about 60% of the dietary intake in Okinawa until 1950 was sweet potatoes. And there's all kinds of, it's low glycemic, they're easy to make, they taste sweet, but they're not all that bad for you. They're full of beta-carotene, they're relatively high protein. So it's one of those things that if it's around, you're more likely to eat it.
Well, bread's pretty controversial now. You got Wheat Belly and other books about wheat. In your book, you mentioned a lot of sourdough. The sourdough seemed to be thumbs up-ish. What's the viewpoint on whole wheat bread? And is it the stuff we buy at the store, or do we have to look for something on the packaging, because we all know how marketers are good at tricking us?
So the extent of my expertise is what the world's longest-lived people have done. And for Blue Zone Solution, which I think everybody has it, we did a meta-analysis of that's it. Yeah, thanks. That's it. A meta-analysis of 155 dietary studies of what centenarians have eaten their whole lives. So this goes back to the 20s and 40s and 60s and 80s, etc. So shockingly, it's not paleo at all. It's very high starch, 65%, and in Western societies, the Adventists, the Sardinians, the Icarians, they're eating either 100% whole wheat bread. It's not just whole wheat, because whole wheat, they say there's whole wheat and then it's 60% white flour, or else a sourdough bread. And if you're having a true sourdough bread leavened with lactobacillus, that actually lowers the glycemic load of a meal. So it's a net positive. I wouldn't tell you to eat a half a loaf of bread, but I will tell you that if you're eating one piece of sourdough bread with your meal, it's a net positive, real sourdough. So we go to the store, we go to Whole Foods, or we go to HEB. Is there any specific thing on the label that tells you it's truly 100% whole wheat, or is it just when it says 100% whole wheat? If it says 100% whole wheat, it is.
Okay.
But beware if it just says whole wheat or multi-grain or stone ground or all that marketing crap. 100% whole wheat, it's probably a good, another bread, I don't really talk about brands, but that's Ezekiel bread you get in your freezer. It's actually pretty good because it's sprouted wheat.
Yeah, we go for a lot of that. If you leave it out, it goes bad really fast, though. You got to keep it cold.
Yes. Yeah.
So then the other thing, you said a lot of starch, so that's also a little, so sweet potatoes, and how about old-fashioned potatoes, like a baked potato? Is that on the list?
Yes. If you're eating a baked potato with a meal, you're not filling it up with butter and sour cream, net positive. If you're chopping it up and making it into fries and potato chips, net negative.
And one of the things you mentioned a lot in your book, and everyone seems to rave about, but I have no idea how to eat because I don't like Indian food, is turmeric. Everyone's always talking about how great turmeric is for you. But how the heck do you eat turmeric? It's not like ginger. I can eat a piece of ginger. I like it. I can put it in my smoothie. I don't even really know what to do with turmeric. So any advice there?
Well, most of those yellow curries, what makes them yellow is turmeric. So
I don't like curry that much. That's the only thing, but okay. Any other
none
suggestions?
of the stuff, there's no magical food here. It's not. Okay. There's not. Americans kind of been marketed this idea: if we get this omega-3 fatty acid, or more protein, or more vitamin D, that we're going to get healthy. That's actually the wrong way to think about it. A better way to think about it is, what can I triage from my diet? And if you're getting rid of the stuff like your family's obviously doing, don't worry about the turmeric.
It's funny, Dan, do you have kids?
Yes, 3.
So here's the thing, like I got it rid out of my diet, and my wife, we do great, but our kid, it seems like every restaurant you go to, the options are chicken fingers, hamburger, or mac and cheese. What did you do with your kids to get them eating healthier?
Well, they don't completely eat healthy, but I do model the right diet, I believe, and when they're at my house, they're eating healthy. And I don't. My oldest is 29, and he's just starting. He and his wife are actually just starting to go more plant-based. And my youngest, who is 18 and a big sports fan, like a adolescent will, he just kind of thinks I'm a loser, and because I'm not a burger eater.
Right.
But they'll come around.
So then let's talk about meat in the diet, because that's one thing. I've cut my red meat to once a week, but I certainly am not doing it as a side dish like your book recommends. I'm trying to, but the meat's just such a staple of American foodstuffs. How do you personally handle meat? Are you just keeping it to one portion a day or one portion a week?
So if you look at the pattern in Blue Zones, they do eat meat about 5 times a month. 4 of those times, it's just a small piece, a condiment. 1 time a month, it's a big party. They'll slaughter a pig, or it's mostly pork, by the way. Never beef, occasionally chicken. But, in all longevity, when they're celebrating with pork, but not bacon for breakfast and bologna sandwich and pork chop. It's slow-cooked pork once a month, a big party. So one of my advisors is Harvard's Walter Willett, and he's got a great metaphor for meat. And he said you ought to look at it like radiation. We know a lot of it will kill you. If you're eating a lot of meat, more than once or twice a day, your chances of heart disease, cancer, and diabetes about triple. But if you're eating like you are, David, once a week, it's probably not going to hurt you, just like in the occasional X-ray, that radiation.
I just said actually red meat. I probably eat something like fish or chicken in most meals.
Okay. First of all, fish is a different category, but you might as well just lump chicken into pork and beef. Chicken's no better for you, especially if you have the skin on it. And what the saturated fat readings never take into account the subcellular fat you see in chicken. So if you want to, I'm never here to tell people what to do or what not to do, but I will tell you that eating chicken's no better than eating a steak or a pork chop.
Well, it's a work in progress. We're definitely dialing it back. One thing I loved in your book, too, was to talk about eating more beans, and I love beans. I don't really know how to cook them as easy as other things, but Tracy does, and so you talk about beans like fava beans and all these different gonzo beans or garbanzo beans.
I like the gonzo beans.
So what, chickpeas, I guess, were in there. So just beans is where you get your protein, I guess, instead of the meat. Is that what these folks do?
Yeah, so according to the CDC, the average American gets about twice as much protein as they should get. And we're kind of obsessed with protein, especially people who work out. They think I need more protein. Well, they probably don't. But if you are obsessed with protein, you'll get healthier protein, and you'll get more of it per dollar by eating beans than you will eating meat. In Blue Zones, they're eating some kind of bean every day and about a cup of it. And they've just taken the time. I mean, we tend to unleash all of our culinary expertise on, bone marrow and pork belly and, a slice of steak. But in Blue Zones, they've tended to turn their culinary excellence to beans, and they know how to make beans taste good. And I've kind of made it my passion the last year or so, collecting bean recipes that taste good. And you'd be shocked how satisfying an Icarian stew or a sardine minestrone with 5 beans, how satisfying it is, how good it tastes, and how you don't really even miss meat.
That's great. Yeah, when you get the right bean dish, it just seems like it's delicious. You don't even notice if there's meat in there or not. So let's move on. Before I get off of a diet, there's 2 other things I want to cover with you. You mentioned the collagen. Recently, there's a craze on collagen powder and something called bulletproof coffee and having butter in your coffee. Have you heard of that at all?
Yes, I've heard of the
So
diet.
what do you think of collagen powder? Does that do the same as boiling pork for 3 days like those folks were in the villages? And supplements in general, what's your viewpoint on supplements in general?
Well, I can tell you in no blue zones were people taking supplements.
Okay.
As a rule, when people take supplements, it gives them permission to eat junky food later on in the day. And if you look at the meta-analysis of people who take supplements, they actually have higher rates of mortality than people who don't. So there's no pill out there that's been shown to stop or reverse or um, even slow aging. So I don't believe in any supplement, except for beans. A cup of beans is the best supplement you can.
Yep,
Same goes
got it.
with collagen. I mean, collagen is essentially a protein. So I think the pork they're talking about is the Okinawan pork belly, which they boil for 3 days and they siphon off the fat, and what's left is really just collagen. But that's protein. You're much better off getting your protein from plant-based sources.
And dairy doesn't seem to be too much of a big hit in most of these areas. Is that correct? There's not a lot of dairy being consumed, mostly goat cheese or sheep cheese, but not as much cow cheese. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's no cow's dairy in any of the blue zones, any measurable amount. You do see sheep and goat cheese, which is metabolically very different than cow's dairy. Tends to be lower glycemic. It tends to have less lactose. And it tends to be much richer. So you can be satisfied with a piece of cheese the size of an ice cube. So you're not eating a lot of it. Again, like most of these rich and sort of naughty foods, they eat them in the blue zones, but just a little as to flavor their food and as a celebration, not this sort of every breakfast, lunch, and dinner like we kind of do in America.
We're pretty spoiled. So then the caloric restriction thing, I guess the Okinawan lady only ate till she was 80% full. She even had like a prayer about it. And that's something I guess you also advocate is eating 80% of your meal. Or in America, some plates are so big you could eat 30% of it and probably be full. So eat not till you're full, but till you're 80% full. Is that a good habit?
Remember it, but again, it has to be an environmental shift rather than something. If I ask, even if I convince you, David, that say hara hachibu, which is what Okinawans say, it's a Confucian adage that means roughly stop when at 80%. If you can remember to do that, most people don't remember it long enough. The way Okinawans eat 80% is they pre-plate their food at the counter, then they put the leftovers away ahead of time. They're eating off of smaller plates, so they're consuming 20% fewer calories, and they're not tempted by the big serving bowl sitting in front of them. So that works. Another way to kind of take 20% out of your daily caloric intake is eat a huge breakfast. Breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper. People eat big breakfasts, consume fewer calories over the day. Eating with your family, taking electronics out of the kitchen. All of these things occasion consuming fewer calories. Taking the toaster off of your counter will help you.
Deconveniencing your house like you talked about earlier. So let's jump to community. You mentioned that the longest lived peoples have very strong communities. You said the Seventh-day Adventists, they spend Saturday together, they shut off all the electronics, they have parties, they hang out, they have a lot of love, I suppose, they're surrounded by. How do you see that playing out in U.S. society? What's more we could do in that area?
Well, from what I understand of GoBundance, you guys pretty much hit the nail on the head. It's not so much, I live in this huge community, everybody loves each other, and we have big parties. That helps, but what's more important is having 5 friends that have healthy habits that you can count on a bad day, that you can have a meaningful conversation with. And that may be a little easier in blue zones because people tend to live in villages, so they're unlike a suburb where you get in your car and you go to work. In blue zones, you're bumping into your neighbors all the time. They tend to live in areas that require perhaps more cooperation. They have less electronic entertainment, so they're not imploding into their houses or into their iPhone. They still talk to each other. So it's an environment where it's easier to get those 5 friends. And in Okinawa, I talk about these moais, which is an intentional effort on the part of 5 people to commit for life to take care of each other, financially, medically, psychologically, and in a friendship sense. And we all have the capacity to do that, and it's so, so important.
There's a saying we have that often you are the sum of your 5 closest friends.
Oh,
So
really?
when you're, yeah, like your wealth is usually about the average of your 5 closest friends. Your fitness is usually the average of your 5 closest friends. So these Mauis,
It's spelled M-O-E-I, Moai.
Maui. You couldn't. You want to make sure those 5 people have healthy habits, right? So you might, unlike getting chosen at birth in Okinawa, we might have to select our Maui from people that want to live the great life we want to live as well, and hold us accountable to living that healthy, more movement-based lifestyle.
So think about it. If you're 5 best friends, their idea of getting together is let's barbecue baby back ribs,
right,
or sausages or brats, and drink beer. What are you going to do when you hang out with them?
Drink beer and eat brats.
That's right. And it's not that there's not a place for that, but if health becomes a value for you, it becomes a goal, well, I wouldn't tell you to dump those 5 friends. I would tell you that augmenting your social network with another 5 group of friends who are, climb Machu Picchu, or who, are interested in trying, I hate to say this, but vegetarian or vegan food. That's the closest analog to blue zone eating without trying to put a lot of description to it.
Yeah, I would tell you that.
Will make you healthier.
If your friends are destructive, I would tell you to dump them and move on. But I understand that there's some pain in that. But and then the other thing you talk a lot is spirituality and community. And one of my friends asked, does meditating count as a religious act? Because he doesn't go to church, but he meditates.
Does what count?
Meditating.
I would say meditation counts. So again, this is a correlation, right? So the people in blue zones almost always belong to a faith-based community. And if you look at meta-analysis of people who, there's been a bunch of studies done, Duke University, Harvard, a guy named Harold Benson. If you look at churchgoers who show up to church 4 times a month, they live 4 to 14 years longer than people who don't. So then you say to yourself, well, what explains that? And it could be they have a better social network. It could be they're less likely to engage in risky behaviors. It could be they have a period every week where they slow down and downshift and de-stress. Or it could be there's a God and God said so. We don't know. Meditation, apart from that, we know is good, but we're not sure if they're completely, there's a complete crossover. I would say do both. I'm not a particularly religious person, to be honest with you, so I got no agenda here. But I will tell you that churchgoers tend to be healthier people than non-churchgoers.
Well, that's a good reason to go to church.
Or at least give it a try.
Give it a try. So let me ask you another question. When I first met you, you asked, I think it was 9 questions, and if people answered yes or no to those questions, they had a higher or lower likelihood of living to a certain age. Can you remind me of those questions?
Yeah, they're taken from the Vitality Compass, essentially.
Okay.
But I'll do it right now.
If you want the compass, we can just send everyone to the compass.
Yeah, the compass actually, it's been called out by the Wall Street Journal twice as the most accurate life expectancy tool. It's free and it takes about 3 minutes. And it takes life table data from the CDC. So if you're 40 years old and you're a white male, we know what your baseline is, and then we can get a better read on how long you're going to live based on your habits. Are you a big meat eater? Are you lonely? Are you physically active? You eat a lot of dairy? And rather than go through it here, you take 3 minutes to get good
diagnosis. That website. So tell me about the success you've had in creating blue zones in the United States of America. Pick any one. I spent a lot of time in Minnesota. I know you have several up there, but which one are you most excited about now, and what's the process of blue zoning a community?
So the key, it took me 8 years to figure this out, but when you look at blue zones and spry 80, 90, 100-year-olds are still standing on their heads or active or enjoying life, none of them said at age 40, oh, God darn it, I'm going to get on that longevity diet, or they didn't buy a Treadmaster or join a gym or buy a Fitbit or call an 800 number for a supplement. None of them tried to live a long time. And the key insight here was that longevity ensued. It was the result of the right environment, much more than it was the result of some individual responsibility or some pursuit. You know, we tend to think of health. We're going to buck up and get healthy. That doesn't work. It works for a tiny sliver of people. Probably right. The GoBundance folks, probably you guys have the discipline. But for the average American, it just doesn't. Fewer than 20% of Americans get enough physical activity. 70% of us are overweight. So it doesn't work. So I went about in 2008, I got a big grant from AARP to think about how you would optimize the environment or an entire city so that there are ubiquitous, comprehensive nudges and defaults that nudge people all day long to eat a little better, move a little more, socialize, not implode, and live out their purpose, which often means volunteering. And it turns out if you look at the places we spend our days in, workplaces, schools, restaurants, grocery stores, faith-based, there are over 100 design tweaks and policy tweaks. If you look at food policy, built environment, tobacco policy, most cities don't have those optimized. And if you look at our homes, a lot of our homes have a lot of opportunity to make those environments slightly healthier. So your default, kind of like what you do with making sure certain foods are in your house. So in our cities, I hired 3 squads of people. One of them reach about 15% of the individuals and help them with their own houses and social networks. Second squad goes into every school, restaurant, grocery store, workplace and helps them optimize that 15 to 20% better. And the third squad is a policy squad, and we come up with best practice menus. Essentially, do you live in a city that favors chips, sodas, pizzas, and hamburgers, or do you live in a city whose economic support and convenience accessibility favors fruits and vegetables? Simple as that. You have a huge swing in cities that obesity rates of cities who favor one end of the spectrum or the other. So we only get invited into cities, and if we get invited in, we're there for 5 years. Our first city, Albert Lea, Minnesota, we managed to implement about 60 of these citywide nudges, and within about 2 years, we raised life expectancy by about 3.2 years, and healthcare costs went down 40%. Then we went to Los Angeles, the beach cities there, 3 communities, 140,000 people. We've been there 4 years, and we've managed to lower childhood obesity in that community by about 50%, from 18% to 9%.
Is this like Venice Beach and
close?
Manhattan Beach?
Yeah, Manhattan, Redondo, and Hermosa Beach, south of LA.
Yep.
And then we have statewide projects going on in Hawaii, Oregon, and Iowa, about 15 cities collectively there. And then our biggest city right near you guys in Fort Worth, Texas. We've been there for about a year, and very counterintuitive place to set up nudges and defaults because it's very conservative, but Texas health system has embraced it, and the mayor there, Betsy Price, and they're making huge changes.
So Frito-Lay is not exactly sponsoring any of your studies, I guess.
Well, you know, I hesitate to pick on any one company because at the end of the day, until about 1960, there weren't enough calories in this country to feed people. And it was American.
Natural overreaction, yeah.
Yeah, and we've just gotten too good at feeding Americans, and now we have to, I think, shift our ingenuity away from quantity to quality to address the $2 trillion or so dollars per year, and we'll get there. We'll get there the way we did with smoking. I just work with cities who want to accelerate that process.
So what about stress and sleep? Before in a minute, I'm going to open it up to questions to the tribe. But I've got 3 more questions for you. I haven't heard anything about stress, but personally, I've heard no stress is bad for you. Too much stress is bad for you, but you need a little stress to keep yourself alive. And then how do these people sleep in these blue zones?
Well, these people are different than us. They worry about their kids. They worry about their health. They worry about their money. It's a complete mistake to think that somehow you move to a blue zone and people don't have stress. They do have mechanisms that help reduce stress that we know work. Meditation, that often takes the form of ancestor veneration in Okinawa. Taking a nap, very effective, lowers chance of heart disease by about 30%. Happy hour works very well. Prayer, the Adventists will pray. So the notion of sacred daily rituals, I think, is a very powerful, and it's something our parents and grandparents had in their lives, and we might think about bringing those back. As far as sleep goes, I would say they're closer to the idea of you go to bed soon after sunset and you wake up right around sunrise. And on average, they're sleeping 7.5 to 8 hours a night. Most of us, if we're smart, we'd be doing the same thing.
Got it. All right, and then the last question before, again, I open it up to the tribe is, what could we do as a tribe, and what other, simple, give us maybe 5 simple deconveniencing our house, or just ideas for everyday folks that we could implement into our lives going forward.
Well, I'd like to challenge your tribe. Next time you all get together for a meal, go in the back of Blue Zone Solution and make your recipes out of that.
Okay.
Maybe it's a potluck. But in order to start eating plant-based food, you need at least 4 things. You need to be convinced it's good for you, which I hope I did in the book. Number 2, you have to know how to make it. Number 3, you have to taste it and like it. If you don't like it, you're not going to eat it. And then number 4, you have to have a tribe around you to reinforce those. And you guys have all the makings of all 4 of that. And I think you'd be doing yourselves a big favor if you kind of experiment it. Or have somebody else, have a private chef read the book and make it and get together around those foods instead of the usual steak and shrimp and, the paradigm of what we normally eat. I actually love what GoBundance stands for, and I know you have kind of a service project as part of your outings, and I think continuing to stress that is right on. I also encourage, to the extent that you guys can get to know each other in a way that transcends your sort of buddy-buddy, to the extent that you guys can count on each other when you have a bad day, and not a slap on the back sports fan kind of way, but women actually do it better than men. Women live longer than men when it comes to being able to really triage a emotional situation and be able to talk to. And that takes a while to build up that, but to the extent that your organization can provide that outlet for each other, I think that adds a lot of power.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So one thing we do is create peer partners where we hopefully get authentic and hold each other accountable. And I know that my 2 best buds through GoBundance that I've known now for 10 years, my wife calls us the little girls club because we get on the phone and we talk for an hour and a half, which
I love
is
that.
very unusual for guys. Yeah. So I have a question.
I got worried after a minute when you said we get together and hold each other, and then you said accountable.
Accountable, yes. I don't think she'd like that as much if that was the case. So let me ask you a question, Heather. Are they going to be able to ask questions directly, or do they have to type them into the chat?
So far, people have been typing into the chat. I wasn't.
Okay, I see one here. It says, so this is an audience question. It says, what about healthy functioning years versus total life expectancy? I would assume that these people live functionally as well, but what about
So,
that?
so the general rule is the longer you've lived, the healthier you've been. So the cohort of people who are dying in their 60s suffer of 7 or 8 years of morbidity or disability. And those typically are the people who weren't taking care of themselves. They have diabetes, heart disease. The 100-year-olds, their morbidity period's about 9 months. They live a long time and tend to die quickly. So if you're aiming to live to 100, you're also going to compress that disability period.
So it's more like a table, right? I've seen it described like, yeah, you live a long time and then you die quickly versus people that die earlier have a slope where it just gets worse and worse over time.
Right.
I don't know if that image is making any sense.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, it's exactly right. They fall off a cliff. They fall off sort of a life table cliff. And so centenarians, especially in Okinawa more so than anywhere, they'll be functioning until they're 106 months, and then they'll get sick, or they'll fall and break their hip. That's usually a trigger, because all of us kind of lose bone density with age. You can't avoid it. You can slow it down, but it's often a broken hip that does it, or they go to bed someday and they just don't wake up. No matter what, the human body ages, and the rate of age doubles every 7 years. So in the same way that a Pinto, nobody's driving a Ford Pinto anymore. You can take care of that Ford Pinto perfectly. You can change the oil on schedule and you repair the pistons and everything, but eventually the thing just falls apart. So it happens to our body too. The name of the game here is getting the maximum number of good years out of your life. And for the average American, it's 12 to 14 years. The Vitality Compass, incidentally, will calculate your healthy life years too.
Nice. Okay, so it's calculated right there.
Yeah.
And then you talked about like inflammation in the body is sort of the enemy, right? So cancer, heart disease, this all comes from inflammation?
Well, many cancers, heart disease has its roots in chronic inflammation. Every age-related disease. So it doesn't assure you're going to get these diseases, but it stacks the deck in favor. You're more likely to have bad arteries and brain shrinkage and wrinkly skin and cancer and Alzheimer's if you're chronically inflamed from being stressed out, working out too much, eating lots of meat and cheese and sugar. Your gastrointestinal tract, if you open it up, has the surface area of a tennis court. And most of our inflammation actually comes from subclinical gastrointestinal inflammation that you don't even know is there. It's just because you've been eating crappy food. Mm. It builds up slowly and silently over time.
Can you kind of kickstart that out with like, juice cleanses or
juice cleanses are crap. Do not cleanse. Juicing is the absolute wrong thing to do. It takes what's a very healthy thing, which is fruit, and squeezes out the healthiest part. You centrifuge out the healthiest part and throw it away. When you take an orange or even a carrot and squeeze out the juice, all you have is the sugar and a few of the vitamins, but it has the same glycemic load as a Coke. So you drink that down, the sugar soars. Eat the whole fruit, and there's no such thing as a cleanse.
So the smoothie is better, or still not good?
Well, if you want a smoothie, get a Vitamix and throw the whole orange in there, or throw the whole fruit in there, and grind that up. But don't squeeze out the pulp.
Sometimes that's how I get my kid to eat a little vegetable, because I put in the banana and the strawberry, and she doesn't realize I threw in a little kale.
Do you know the secret to getting your kids to eat vegetables if you got little kids?
What's that?
So before the meal, let's go out and buy 10 vegetables. You don't know what vegetable your kids like. It might be radish, carrots, celery, peppers, broccoli. I don't know, but buy 10 of them. And put them in little plates. Cut them up nice and put them in little plates. And before the meal starts, say we're going to do something fun today. We're going to try a bunch of new foods. And you put all those plates out. Maybe you put some dips out. And you watch what your kid eats. might be peas, and pay attention to that. Then the next time you do that, you put out what your kids like, and then the next time after that, you try cooking them. But trying to force a kid to eat broccoli who doesn't like broccoli is a dead end street. But kids have different tastes, and you'd be shocked if you cater to their tastes, you'll get them to eat it.
Got it. All right. So any other questions out there, guys?
Yeah, Rock had asked, what do you know about mono meals?
What meals?
Mono, M-O-N-O. So just individual,
Eating 20 bananas.
eating like 20 bananas.
Nothing, nor does that follow the pattern in longevity cultures in any way.
So eating one kind of food all day, I guess, sounds like that's that. How about some guys are doing 6 meals a day, smaller meals a day? Anything on that?
You don't see that in blue zones. It's 3 meals. And snack on nuts.
Snack on nuts. All right.
Another question.
Any other questions?
Yeah, negative parts of a paleo diet was asked.
What are the negative parts of the paleo diet? We got some paleo guys in our tribe, so why is that hard on the system?
Well, first of all, it's a flawed premise, because even if the goal was to eat as our paleo ancestors did, life expectancy in paleo times was about 29. So maybe the diet optimizes procreative success, but it's not a diet for, living to 60 or 70 or 80. There's too much meat in there. It chastises grain without any really good rationale other than our paleo ancestors didn't eat it. I don't know of any controlled studies that have followed people eating a paleo diet and then a non-paleo diet and seen a better outcome with the paleo people. But
so the paleo people might be stronger and bigger temporarily, but it's not necessarily giving you life expectancy.
Correct. It's like testosterone for guys. You can at age 50 or 60, when you're testosterone age, you can take testosterone therapy and you'll get bigger muscles and you'll have a bigger sex drive. But life expectancy of people taking testosterone treatments is about 6 years less than guys that don't. So it's like trying to put a big engine in a Model A car. I mean, it might run faster for a while, but it's going to fall apart quicker.
So there's no going backwards in life, I guess. We're not going to be 20 again. Is that correct? That's too bad.
Well, you don't know. I mean, there's also the pace of discovery. More likely, we'll figure out how to slow aging but not reverse damaging. So those of us, I think, who kind of still hold out for some amazing, probably genetic intervention that will improve our lives or extend our life expectancy, it's probably going to stop us where we are as opposed to make us go backwards. So
all the more reason to
as you can right now. It's probably
all the more reason to look after yourself. What about sun damage? These guys must be outside a lot. Are they using sunblock or wearing big hats? Or
they wear hats, but they're uniformly in blue zones. They're getting much more sun than the average American does. Certainly the average American living up in Minnesota, where I'm from. Most Americans are vitamin D deficient, especially older Americans. And people living in blue zones are out in their gardens and they're out walking and they're getting that sunshine. 20 minutes of quality sunshine on your face, your arms, and your legs, just wearing shorts, you get more vitamin D than you will drinking 2 gallons of milk. So being outside, I think, obviously people, Scandinavians who are super sensitive to the sun, they ought to pay attention to it, but I think we've overdone it with sunscreen. That's not talking from a dermatology point of view, it's talking from an overall point of view.
Got it. Heather, I don't see the questions you're seeing, so do you have more there?
Yes, I do. I have one. How important are healthy fats? So the omegas 3, 6, and 9s.
So I think Americans have gotten misguided in trying to look at the components of food and then tinker with more fat or less fat or more carbohydrates and less carbohydrates. To the extent you can, you want to eat food the way it appears in nature and not worry about trying to get more omega-3 or omega-6s. If you're eating a diet that's 90% plants, that's complex carbohydrates, you're eating some nuts every day, some beans every day, some greens every day, you're going to get everything you need. At least that's what we see in blue zones.
Great. Heather, any more?
Yes, we have a question here. How do you prevent Alzheimer's?
Well, you can lower your chances of getting Alzheimer's disease. A Mediterranean diet, walking an hour a day, having a good social network, avoiding depression, keeping your blood pressure under check. In Ikaria, this is a place with about 1/5 the rate of dementia, including Alzheimer's, of America. And you look at their lives, purest form of the Mediterranean diet. They live in a vertical community. They're walking everywhere, but it's up and down. They're eating regularly 20 or 30 different types of greens, everything from mustard to dandelion to kale to cabbages. And they're drinking 3 kinds of teas, including an oregano, thyme, a catnip tea, and even a dandelion tea. And all those are mild diuretics, and that may be protecting their brains from small vascular tears over time.
Do you happen to know if those teas get ruined by the processing they do to get us the bulk teas we're buying in the supermarket, or would we be better having a little herb garden, or is it really still better than nothing? Because I'm sure theirs is right out of the earth, very fresh.
Yeah, but they'll dry them. Yeah, it's better to have them fresh, but even in blue zone, even in Ikaria, there's a season they grow and they'll pick them and they'll dry them, and then when in the off season they'll make them out of dry teas. Let's take one more question.
Sure. And the next question I have here is, what about a master cleanse or fasting?
Okay. I don't believe in master cleansing, and I didn't see master cleansing or anything remotely similar to master cleansing in any blue zones. Fasting, however, may have some substance to it. So the Icarians probably are fasting about half of the year because of their religious holidays.
Your first time. Oops, sorry.
Yes. There was forced fasts in many of the blue zones in that there was periods of famine, 3 or 4 years. And by the way, caloric restriction is the only known way to slow down the aging process. It does seem to work, but there's some downsides to it, i.e. you're often cold, you have low energy and no sex drive. Interestingly, in the blue zones, they tend to eat all of their foods in about a 6-hour period. So they'll have a big, huge breakfast, a lunch, and then little or no dinner. And then they're not eating for 14 or 16 hours, which is a de facto fast every day. And that's probably a pretty good cycle to think about. It's sort of a fast.
Dan, you've been awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. I know we've learned a ton, and I, for one, am going to listen to this again and make sure my wife and my 5 closest friends listen to it so we can all be accountable to just having our environment support our goals and having an easier way to a healthier and longer life. So I think your work is amazing. We're lucky to have you in this country, and thanks for the knowledge and the wisdom and your life purpose.
I was delighted. And let me just say, in all honesty, I really salute your mission, and I wish I lived around you guys so I could join GoBundance.
Well, we'd love to have you with us. Maybe we'll get you to one of our events
David,
one day. Yes.
Before you close, we were going to announce the next book that we're doing as well. So.
Let's let Dan jump off. Thank you, Dan. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Okay,
you guys.
Mike. Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye, Dan.
All right, thank you. Awesome. So we have with us the author of our next book right now. Jim, are you online there?
Hey, Mike. Yeah, I'm here. I've been on the whole call.
All right, great. Cool. So we've got Jim Shells here, and he's going to be sharing with us a little bit about his book. Tell us about your book, Jim, and why we should read it next.
Well, it's an easy read, so that's always a nice surprise that people tell me say it was a really easy read. But I think actually it's kind of interesting listening to Dan's call, and I love Dan's stuff. I've read it. I got married in the blue zone near Costa Rica. That's in Costa Rica, and I guess I'm kind of very dedicated to the one thing he talks about on community, the same way that you are, Mike, with GoBundance, and that's what the book is about, because I think community starts at home. And when I started to work with a lot of entrepreneurs, I saw that all of them were working hard for the same reason. It was for that flexibility to have the freedom, usually with the people closest to them, which was normally their family and their kids. But a lot of them, through the hustle and bustle, were feeling disconnected. Feeling like they were almost on the surface with their kids, feeling like they were inconsistent. And that can leave any of us feeling guilty and depressed and disconnected, which is not good for the blue zones, not good for whatever time we have here. And about 5 years ago, I started doing what I call family board meetings with my kids. And the effect kind of grew not only for my own family, but sharing the results and seeing what other people were doing. And now the strategy's gone viral in a lot of entrepreneur communities, and it's really just a simple three-point system. Mike, I know you use it, and it's just a simple system to help people stay consistently connected with their kids and get below the surface in a fun, meaningful way.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I read the book. It was an easy read. I've been following your suggestions in that book. We're going to be sending that out to everybody. It's an e-book. It's a quick read. And then after we read it, after we read the book, which is called The Family Board Meeting, we'll have Jim back on a call with us, and then we can ask questions and have him kind of discuss it with us. And I want to thank Pete Cook for introducing me to Jim. It's been great applying your tools, and thanks for tuning in to the Blue Zones call with us, Jim, and for sharing the book with everybody as well. We really appreciate it.
No, I love being here. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Jim.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Mike.
everybody.
All right.
Take
Bye,
care, guys.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.